For a bunch of years, technical communication has talked about the social justice turn, characterized by momentum towards investigating how communication, broadly defined, can amplify the agency of oppressed people, those who are materially, socially, politically, and/or economically under-resourced. This definition, posed by Natasha Jones, Kristen Moore, and Rebecca Walton, has helped lead us towards a more unified disciplinary commitment to acknowledging and redressing structural inequities and silences. But just because we're in a period that is ostensibly after this turn doesn't mean that there still isn't work to be done, especially when it comes to our own commitments to furthering this work in our classrooms, communities, and scholarship.
So you've got these people that's still ongoing, right? People who think our field's job is to support other fields, and that's how we get status and power and legitimacy. And there are people who believe our work is, to, do the humanistic work, even if you don't call it social justice, right? And that sort of debate and those that infighting kind of thing that happens, right, is a big distraction. And it's another one of those narcissistic tendencies.
But we really think that one of the ways that we can sort of center social justice in our disciplinary identity and move us toward the power and legitimacy that we've been seeking as a profession is to say that it is essential to the work that we do as technical communication scholars and practitioners to interrogate power and to be critical of the ways that legitimacy is marked through language and other kinds of communication in our work.
That was Dr. Cecilia Shelton and Dr. Sarah Warren Riley, authors of Historicizing Power and Legitimacy After the Social Justice Turn, Resisting Narcissistic Tendencies. This article was published in November 2022 in Technical Communication Quarterly. So, in this article, you discuss narcissistic tendencies as one of the key barriers to enacting social justice work in technical communication. So for viewers who haven't read this article yet, how would you define a narcissistic tendency?
For us, we're using the term narcissistic in a colloquial sense. So we're really trying to draw on popular understandings of the word narcissistic as a way to refer to people who are like self-centered and overly concerned with appearances. So when we use a phrase like narcissistic tendencies in the article, for us, it's a kind of sort of powerful, punchy shorthand to talk about a form of self-centeredness that focuses too much on the surface, on what's superficial. And so we think that in the field, these tendencies have the effect of obscuring our perception and creating obstacles that divert us and our attention away from deep engagement with issues below the surface having to do with social justice.
Right. If we're going to really make change in our own institutions, we have to stop. We can't stop at, I teach social justice. I write about social justice. We have to actually encode social justice into our own institutions and departments.
Right. So I know in your study, you kind of looked at these two materials. So these publicly available online course catalog descriptions for introductory technical communication courses, granting those TPC PhDs, and Dr. Kena Chukiak's list of self-identified, multiply marginalized, and underrepresented scholars in TPC. So while we talk about these two things that you looked at, what did you first learn from looking at the course descriptions?
We had hoped that they might provide us some sort of indication of whether or not social justice or just humanistic language at all was being embedded in course descriptions. And at the time we looked at them, right, there was none. And that was more troubling than whether there was explicit social justice language. There wasn't even really discussion of the fact that technical communication has impacts for humans. To be frank, what we learned was that they reified to, traditional notions of what tech comm is, right? Students will write reports, memos, other engineering related, a lot of reference to fields outside of our own.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when we were even planning this channel, that was one of the things that we really wanted to highlight, is that technical communication is quite literally more than memos. It's more than the genres that people are creating. It's all about the effects that, like you said, technical communication has on people, and particularly as it pertains to social justice, which is one of our primary kind of investments in doing this channel. So I know the other kind of documents that you looked at was this MMU list. So what were some of your key takeaways from looking at this kind of set of documents?
What we found is that the vast majority of multiply marginalized scholars, based on Dr. Ichokiak's list, 74%, I think, at the time that we did the study, are in some way precarious, right? Whether that it means that they are still in graduate school, they are untenured, they are non-tenure track. And so that means that the work that they're doing to advance social justice as a priority in the discipline is also in a precarious situation. And so, given the argument that we're making, that precarity matters for the future of social justice in the field. You alluded earlier to the fact that we're sort of, we want to approach the idea of the social justice turn with some skepticism, and not assume that that turn is a permanent one, but that it can be turned back. And I think we can look around and sort of see that we should be critical of progress narratives that assume forward motion at all times, right? There's a push and pull. And so it would be wise to kind of think about how we make sure that social justice work in tech comm is sustainable. And one of the ways to do that is to think about the status of multiply marginalized scholars.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really resonates here too is that we can't just throw out these terms or look at them only in a historical lens. We need to continue to interrogate them in a lot of different contexts that technical and professional communicators are working, whether that's our classrooms, our research, the communities we're invested in engaging with, in order to make sure that this commitment to reframing power and legitimacy is a continual effort. And I think reciprocity here is another one of the things that really resonated in this piece.
Yeah.
So I know in your article as well, you also offer some concrete examples of what resisting narcissistic tendencies, given kind of the context that you give us about power and legitimacy, can look like. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your vision for social justice work in technical and professional communication, whether that's in scholarship, classrooms, workplaces, or our communities.
Yeah, like things like if you're revising, learning outcomes, you can embed language, right? So that's where our skill set is, and we should probably be more strategic about how we use that skill set, right? I think in learning outcomes and policies about promotion and tenure, right? Like if we're not doing it, someone else is embedding different language, right? So, and some of that could be harmful, right? So
people request that you do like DEI work, DEI committee work. And I think that in some ways, that doesn't give me the opportunity to have my skills make the most impact that they can make. I can talk about equity and inclusion and diversity and social justice, or I can go over here and make sure it is like happening as these policies are written. And so that's kind of what we're trying to encourage people to think critically about. Social justice, you don't have to be on the social justice committee to make it apparent that you're doing social justice work. It might be wise to direct to make sure that you're situated in a place where you can intervene.
I think too that that's really interesting, because one of the things that you talk about in this article is this need to be attuned to positionality, to power, to people's status as being marginalized or multiply marginalized. And so the risks of harm for different people are necessarily different.
Those situations are always shifting and changing. And so we recognize that, like, this is a thorny, complex sort of thing to take on. And we hope that what the article did is invite people into the thinking process with us. and maybe put forward some questions and some challenges. And we worked really hard to include ourselves in the group of people that were asking to take up these questions and challenges. There's a lot of we in that article, and that's by design. We really spend a lot of time talking about collective pronouns. And because we think it's just that important to say that, like, we're talking to and about ourselves and the colleagues with whom we are most committed to working and most admire.
Thanks to Dr. Cecilia Shelton and Dr. Sarah Warren Riley for joining us for today's More Than Memos video. You can read Historicizing Power and Legitimacy After the Social Justice Turn, Resisting Narcissistic Tendencies, online at Technical Communication Quarterly.